Okay, let's jump right into this. We live in an era that is, frankly, almost pathologically obsessed with quick, viral simplifications of human nature. We just love to shove incredibly complex human behavior into neat, intellectually lazy categorical buckets. I mean, think about it for a second. We're completely surrounded by internet relationship gurus who swear they can, read anyone in 1 minute. We see all these pop psychology trends that try to reduce the absolute entirety of your personality down to an MBTI 4-letter box, or they insist that every single one of your current struggles is strictly the result of childhood trauma determinism. Or we try to biohack our daily routines by blaming every motivation we have on one single molecule, dopamine. But as we're going to explore in this explainer, every single one of these simple explanations of you is beautifully, and sometimes terribly, incomplete.
So I want you to picture a deeply contemplative scenario with me. A behavior has just occurred. Imagine a finger pulling a trigger. Or on the flip side, imagine a hand gently touching an arm. And we have to ask the ultimate question, why did it happen? Now, if you pulled a trigger, was that a hideous, cold-blooded act of aggression, or was it an act of self-sacrificing love to draw fire away from an innocent person? If you touched an arm, was that a moment of profound empathy, or the calculated beginning of a betrayal? You see, the physical motor action, the muscles contracting, is exactly the same, but the meaning is entirely dependent on context. To actually answer the question of why a behavior happened, we can't just look at one isolated thing. We literally have to look at everything.
And this brilliantly illustrates the real historical danger of single-lens thinking. It's not just modern internet gurus who fall into this trap. Some of history's most brilliant scientists have done it too. Just look at this quote from John Watson, who was one of the founders of behaviorism back in the 1920s. He said, "Give me a dozen healthy infants, and I'll guarantee to take any one at random and train him to become any type of specialist." He genuinely believed human potential was entirely malleable, resting in this rigid environment-only bucket. He thought he could train anyone to be a doctor, a lawyer, or even a thief, completely ignoring biology. When we get pathologically stuck in a single bucket of explanation, whether we're shouting it's all environment or it's all genetics, we completely blind ourselves to reality.
We really have to contrast this reductionist, categorical approach against the inextricably linked continuum of true biological reality. You just cannot explain a human being through just dopamine or just the troubled childhood or just evolutionary psychology. I get it. Putting facts into cleanly demarcated buckets makes them so much easier to memorize, but it absolutely wreaks havoc on our ability to truly understand them. Because the boundaries between these scientific disciplines, they are entirely arbitrary. True biological reality is a continuum. It's this incredibly deep, complex web where every single factor bleeds seamlessly into the next.
So to truly grasp the beautiful symphony of a single human action, we need to take a magnificent reverse chronological zoom out. We are going to trace a single action starting from the neurobiology of just 1 second before, to the hormones hours before, to the childhood environment years before, all the way back to the evolutionary pressures millennia before you were even born. Let's trace that path.
Section 1. 1 second before, the neural firing.
To really understand our behavior, we have to start at the final common pathway. In the exact second before you act, specific neural circuits fire. But the primary player making the big decisions in that critical second is your frontal cortex. Now let's define this not with dry anatomy, but by its supreme function. The frontal cortex is the brain's ultimate, highly energy-expensive arbiter of doing the harder thing when it is the right thing to do. It is the region that reins in your impulsivity, postpones gratification, and regulates your wildest emotions. It's that voice inside you that refrains from blurting out something cruel at a dinner party or suppresses the urge to just run away in sheer terror. And make no mistake, it takes immense metabolic energy to do the harder, right thing. But contrast the frontal cortex with the amygdala, which is the brain's center for fear, anxiety, and aggression. The amygdala operates on a rather tragic evolutionary shortcut: speed over accuracy. Literally fractions of a second before your visual cortex can accurately process an image and tell your frontal cortex, hey, relax, he's just pulling a cell phone out of his pocket, the amygdala has already looked at a blurry visual shortcut, panicked, screamed, it's a gun, and initiated a massive cascade of aggression. So in that one defining second before a tragedy, the amygdala's sheer speed can completely overwhelm the frontal cortex's accuracy.
Section 2. Minutes to days before, the world of senses and hormones.
Now, no brain operates in a vacuum, right? So we have to zoom out a bit further to explore the silent forces that primed your nervous system before that 1 second even happened. Why did your amygdala react so aggressively in that specific moment? Well, often it comes down to things we aren't even consciously aware of. Our brains are incredibly, almost scarily attuned to subliminal triggers. For instance, studies show that if you flash a face of another race to a subject for just a tenth of a second, which is way too fast for the conscious mind to even register seeing a face at all, the amygdala detects it. It can activate an instant, fearful response in just 100 milliseconds. Over the course of minutes, simply the temperature of the room you're in, a foul smell, or a subliminal visual cue can unconsciously shift your entire brain into a state of heightened, nervous vigilance.
And then, as we zoom out over the hours and days prior, we introduce hormones into the mix. Let's ask a provocative question that challenges one of those classic categorical buckets we talked about earlier. Does testosterone cause aggression? Because pop psychology absolutely loves to tell us that testosterone is the definitive aggression molecule, that it simply invents aggressive behavior out of thin air.
Well, the absolutely crucial point here is that this is a complete myth. Hormones like testosterone do not cause or invent actions. Instead, what they do is amplify pre-existing tendencies and sensitize your brain to social triggers. Think of it this way. If you're already prone to aggression, testosterone simply lowers the threshold required for your environment to trigger it. Hormones don't dictate your behavior. They merely adjust the volume dial on the brain's sensitivity to the world around it.
Section 3. Years before. Childhood environment and neuroplasticity.
Leaving the immediate short-term environment behind, we have to look deep into your past. How did your childhood, and actually even your fetal environment, sculpt the very physical structure of the brain you're using today? We can trace this through a sequential, epigenetic chain of causality. You see, the amount of maternal care you received or the early adversity and stress you faced didn't just affect your mood as a kid, it literally left lasting chemical marks on your DNA. These epigenetic changes alter how genes are expressed in your brain for the rest of your life. Growing up in an environment of chronic childhood stress can permanently enlarge the amygdala and weaken the frontal cortex, fundamentally altering how you will respond to a frightening stimulus 20, 30, or 40 years later.
And this entire concept is beautifully highlighted by the remarkable biological fact that the frontal cortex is the very last part of the brain to fully mature. It often doesn't finish wiring up until we are in our mid-20s. Why? Why would evolution leave our most important decision-making center unfinished for so long? Because human evolution brilliantly designed our frontal cortex to be freed from genetic rigidity. By developing so late, the frontal cortex is sculpted maximally by your life experience, by the intricate rules, the nuances, and the culture of the society you grow up in. Your genes essentially step back and let your environment finish building the most complex part of your brain. It's incredible.
Section 4. Centuries to millennia before. The evolutionary roots.
Stepping completely out of your own lifespan and into deep time, we finally reach the immense evolutionary pressures, ecological factors, and cultural histories that started the ball rolling centuries and millennia before you were even born. Look at how centuries of cultural evolution fundamentally wire how our brains perceive reality. Studies show profound differences between individuals raised in Western versus East Asian cultures. Western cultures, which were shaped by specific agricultural and philosophical histories, tend to problem-solve by looking at the intrinsic, absolute properties of objects in total isolation. East Asian cultures, shaped by different ecological demands that required massive communal cooperation, tend to view objects relationally and contextually. The very way your eyes physically track a visual scene right now was shaped by what your ancestors were doing to survive 1,000 years ago.
And as we step back millions of years, we see that evolution itself is a tinkerer. It's an improviser. It rarely builds complex social behaviors from scratch. Instead, it repurposes ancient biological systems. For example, millions of years ago, mammals evolved a brain region called the insula to process the literally disgusting taste of spoiled toxic food. But when early humans later needed a way to process a brand new, highly abstract concept, moral disgust, evolution just handed the insula a shoehorn and some duct tape. So today, when we see a horrific moral violation, our brain activates the exact same neural region that makes us want to vomit from eating rotten meat. It's all connected.
Section 5. The Symphony of You, Beyond Single Labels.
We finally bring all of these immense timescales back to the present moment to formulate a revolutionary new understanding of human nature. The grand umbrella perspective of all this is quite simple yet profound. You cannot invoke one single discipline of explanation without implicitly invoking every single biological influence that came before it.
If you say a behavior happened because of a surge of dopamine, you are implicitly saying it happened because the environment days ago altered those dopamine receptors, which happened because your childhood shaped that brain circuitry, which happened because millennia of evolution built that reward system in the first place. There are no separate buckets. There is only a continuous, magnificent flow. And this framework demands a profound shift in how we view ourselves and others. We must absolutely reject the cheap, fast judgments of the modern world. You are not just your MBTI profile. You are not just your childhood trauma. You are not a single label. You are a beautifully complex symphony composed across time. Every action you take is the interlocking of dominoes that stretch back from the present microsecond to the very dawn of humanity. To truly understand why people harm each other, or why they care for each other, we have to embrace this profound, nuanced continuum of what it actually means to be human.
So I want to leave you with this lingering thought. We live in a world that absolutely rushes to judge, to cancel, to categorize, and to condemn in the blink of an eye. But the next time you witness a behavior, the next time you judge someone else's actions, or even your own, how far back will you look? Will you stop at the surface, at the easy label? Or will you take the time to hear the entire symphony?